The high chair is out. The food is ready. 3 weeks ago, your baby was reaching for the spoon before it left the bowl. Now they're turning their head to the side, pressing their lips shut, or picking up a handful of whatever you've offered and dropping it on the floor with no particular drama. The way someone sets down something that simply doesn't interest them anymore. You've already gone through the possibilities. Teething, a cold coming, something they ate yesterday that didn't sit right. Whether the texture is wrong, the temperature is off, whether the brand changed without you noticing. You've told yourself it's a phase. You've also wondered at least once whether it's something more than a phase. The spoon goes in, the baby turns away, and somewhere in your chest something tightens. Because a baby who won't eat is one of those things that lives close to fear. It's one of those parental worries that doesn't announce itself as anxiety. It just shows up at mealtime and sits there. What's happening when a baby stops eating isn't what most parents are told, and the way most parents naturally respond to it. Out of love, out of worry, out of the completely reasonable desire to get some food into a tiny body, can keep the refusal going long after it would otherwise have stopped. If this is already making you see your baby differently, hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps. And drop a comment telling me how old your little one is right now. I love knowing who I'm talking to. Between roughly 6 and 18 months, a baby's brain is processing two competing demands that most developmental charts never explain side by side. The first is a genuine biological shift in how fast the body needs to grow. In the first 6 months of life, the average baby triples their birth weight. That rate of growth requires a caloric urgency that makes appetite feel almost automatic. The hunger signals are strong, the feeding drive is constant, and most parents in this window are managing a baby who seems to want to eat all the time. Then, somewhere between 6 and 12 months, the construction schedule changes. The body slows its expansion and moves toward a different kind of building. The brain is still developing at a speed that won't be matched again until adolescence, but the caloric profile of that brain building is different from the caloric demand of tripling body weight. The hunger signals get quieter because the body needs less, and a baby who was eating with enthusiasm 3 weeks ago genuinely doesn't need as much anymore. A 2019 review published in the journal Appetite, examining appetite regulation across the first 2 years of life, found that the drop in caloric intake parents typically observe between 6 and 12 months is, in the majority of healthy infants, a biologically appropriate response to a real shift in growth rate. The baby's body is accurate. Around 9 to 10 months, a second process begins. Researchers at the University of Copenhagen, studying food rejection behavior in infants and toddlers across cultures, identified a predictable spike in food refusal that starts in the second half of the first year and peaks between 18 and 24 months. This spike is not random, and it is not a personality trait. It is a survival mechanism that human development preserved across hundreds of thousands of years. Before 9 months, a baby is not mobile. They eat what arrives. The moment mobility begins, crawling, pulling up, eventually walking, the baby gains independent access to the world. The world contains things that look like food but are not food, and things that are genuinely dangerous to eat. The instinct to reject unfamiliar foods, textures, and presentations is the developing brain saying, "I know what is safe." New things require evidence. The baby who turns away from the green puree they ate happily 3 weeks ago is not being difficult. They are running a safety check built into human children long before there were high chairs. Most parents never hear this. What they hear instead, from other parents, from the internet, from the ambient hum of parenting culture, is that a baby who stops eating needs to be encouraged, coaxed, that the job is to find what works and to keep trying until something does. So that's what parents do. The airplane spoon. The television in the background so the baby is distracted enough to accept a bite without noticing. Warming the food, cooling the food, changing the bowl, blending it smoother, making it chunkier, celebrating with genuine enthusiasm when 3 spoonfuls go in, hoping the praise will bring more. Sitting across from a small person who has sealed their lips and feeling, behind the patience being performed, a low and persistent worry that something is wrong. Underneath the worry, there is often something the parent hasn't yet named, a quiet fear that the refusal is somehow connected to them, that solids were introduced at the wrong time, that the baby is picking up on stress in the house, a shift in routine, something in how meal times have started to feel. Researchers at the University of Illinois studying parental feeding behavior found that the anxiety a caregiver brings to a mealtime where refusal has previously occurred measurably changes the physiological atmosphere of that meal. Cortisol levels in caregivers who anticipate difficulty are detectably elevated before the first bite is offered. And infants whose stress systems are almost entirely dependent on the co-regulation their caregiver provides read that cortisol, not as language, not as concept, but as climate. The meal arrives already signaling tension, and an appetite that might have opened in a calmer atmosphere stays closed. The parent's anxiety does not cause the initial refusal, but it can absolutely extend it. What makes the refusal persist is a system that was never designed to be overridden. From birth, babies arrive with one of the most calibrated appetite regulation systems in human biology. The internal cues that tell an infant when they are hungry and when they are full are, in the early months, more accurate than almost any external measure a parent could apply. A 2016 study from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, examining early feeding behavior and long-term weight outcomes, found that infants fed in response to their own hunger and fullness cues, rather than in response to parental schedules or anxiety, showed measurably better appetite self-regulation at age 5. The babies who were not overridden learned to trust their own signals. The babies who were regularly coaxed past fullness or encouraged past refusal began, gradually, to stop trusting them. If you're finding this helpful, please subscribe and turn on notifications. I upload new videos every week and I'd hate for you to miss one. Your support is what makes this channel possible, and it genuinely means the world to me. Ellen Satter, a feeding therapist and registered dietitian whose division of responsibility in feeding framework has been adopted by the American Academy of Pediatrics, identified the boundary most parents are inadvertently crossing. The parent's job, in her research, is to decide what food is offered, when it is offered, and where. The baby's job is to decide whether to eat and how much. When those roles cross, when the parent takes on the baby's job by coaxing, tricking, or overriding, the baby's internal system receives a signal that its own cues cannot be trusted. Over time, that system gets noisier, not quieter. The refusal that started as a biological safety check gets layered with something the parent didn't intend to add: the experience of mealtimes as a place where the baby's signals don't get honored. Around the same window, 9 to 18 months, a second process is accelerating that most parents don't connect to feeding at all. Researchers studying early autonomy development have documented a surge in self-determination behavior in the second half of the first year. The baby is learning, for the first time, that they have a will that is separate from their caregiver's will. They can choose to reach or not reach. They can turn toward or turn away. The high chair becomes one of the first places in the baby's life where that will can be exercised. A baby who refuses food at 9 months is not being defiant. They are discovering that their body is a place where the word no can be used. The mouth that clamps shut the second the spoon arrives is not always a rejection of the food itself. Researchers studying feeding behavior in infancy have found this response is frequently triggered by the pace of the feeding rather than its content. When a caregiver is anxious about intake, the rate of spoon presentation increases. The baby whose cues are being missed stops opening altogether. Slowing down, waiting for the baby to open their mouth as the signal before the spoon moves, restores the serve and return pattern that feeding at its core actually is. The baby who accepts a bite and then spits it out is doing something neurologically specific. Food neophobia research from Wageningen University found that repeated exposure to a new food, without pressure and without reaction, is the mechanism by which the brain reclassifies something unfamiliar as safe. A baby may need to mouth, taste, and reject a food 10 to 15 times before accepting it. Spitting is step 4 of a 15-step process. The baby who eats enthusiastically on Monday and refuses the same food on Wednesday is not showing inconsistency that signals a problem. Appetite in infancy is regulated by a system that responds to internal state, sleep quality, growth spurts, sensory sensitivity on any given day, and the emotional atmosphere of the meal itself. A 2020 study from the University of Leeds tracking daily food intake in infants between 6 and 18 months found natural day-to-day variation in caloric intake of up to 40% in healthy infants with no feeding difficulties. The variation parents observe across days is the system working correctly, not failing. The baby who will only eat the same 2 or 3 foods is showing what developmental feeding researchers call a food jag. It is not a preference that has hardened permanently. It is the neophobic safety system at its most active, and the research on how it resolves is consistent. The safe food list expands over time when new foods are offered alongside familiar ones, without pressure, without reaction, and without the new food becoming a negotiation. The brain adds to its list of known safe things slowly and entirely on its own schedule. Now go back to the high chair. The food is ready. The baby turns their head. What you know now changes what that moment is. The baby turning away is not rejecting you. Their body is doing exactly what a body at this stage of development is built to do. Slow down, be selective, exercise the new and unfamiliar weight of having a preference. The appetite that went quiet did so because the biology asked it to. The foods that get refused are refused because a brain that is now mobile and curious is running every new thing through a check it cannot skip. None of that is a crisis. All of it is a stage. What the baby needs from that moment is not a different spoon or a parent willing to try 15 more times. They need the signal that their cues are being read, that the turning away was noticed and accepted, that the table is a place where the body's own language gets an honest answer. A parent who can offer food and genuinely release the outcome, who can place the bowl down and follow the baby's lead on what happens next, is giving their child something that will outlast any single meal. They are teaching the baby's nervous system that hunger and fullness are signals worth trusting. That is the foundation that a healthy relationship with food in childhood, adolescence, and adulthood is built from. Research from the Avon longitudinal study of parents and children, which tracked feeding behavior and outcomes across more than 14,000 children from infancy into early adulthood, found that children whose early feeding environments were low in pressure and high in responsiveness showed stronger self-regulation around food at every age they were measured. The habits that form in the first 2 years don't disappear when the high chair does. They become the template. No parent gets every meal right. And the research on responsive feeding is not a verdict on the parents who ran the airplane spoon out of worry. It is a map for what to do now. The window here is long. A shift in approach at 8 months produces measurable change, so does one at 14 months. The baby who is released from the weight of a watched meal often surprises the parent who releases them. Somewhere in the first year, between the sleepless nights and the endless small tasks of keeping a tiny person alive, the high chair becomes a test. Did they eat enough? Did I do it right? Is something wrong with them or with me? What the science is quietly pointing toward is a different kind of table. One where the baby gets to show you what they want, and you get to watch them discover that they have a say. For a person who has been in the world for 8 or 10 or 14 months, being met at a meal without agenda, without the spoon arriving before the mouth is ready, is one of the earliest experiences of being genuinely seen. The refusal was never really about the food. It was the baby's nervous system asking a question. Is this a safe place? Am I being heard? And every time a parent can answer that question without force, without fear, without the airplane, the answer the baby receives is yes. That answer, repeated across hundreds of ordinary meals in the first 2 years, is what a secure relationship with eating actually looks like from the inside. That's what was happening at the high chair all along. Thank you so much for being here until the very end. It means everything. If this video changed how you see your baby even a little, please share it with another parent who needs to hear it. Check out the videos on your screen now. I think you'll love them. And subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one.